Hello, everybody, and welcome to What's the Story podcast. This is WTS 287. My name is Danny Murray.
And I'm Graham Merrigan.
Mero, how are you?
Good. I have to laugh, Danny. Straight off the bat.
Go
Have
for
to laugh. The last time we recorded, we did an intro where we were Manchester United, and then literally the day after that podcast was released, they got hammered
Yeah.
by Liverpool Football Club 7-0 at Anfield. That was very entertaining.
It was a life lesson, Graham, for me, and it's the hope that kills you. Just doesn't get hopeful about Manchester United.
I remember when it went 5-0, they went 5-0 up. I think I sent you an audio note saying our intro is in the bin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But look, it's
point still stands in terms of United being a different team than last year.
Across the whole of the season, a better team and a team that I'm much happier following and watching week in, week out.
But so entertaining that we did that. The amount of text that I got.
Oh man, like ridiculed. I've been ridiculed, and rightfully so. Look, fair enough. That's
End of the show. David Chambers texted me and said he nearly crashed a car. So if we can provide that entertainment, very good.
But stay safe out there, folks.
Stay safe, David Chambers. Lovage.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's not our finest moment, but this happens regularly. I regularly predict things and they go absolutely haywire. I was for a while, of course, the person who was saying Putin's not that bad a guy. He's not going to do anything stupid, lads. Everybody needs to calm down. And here we are over a year later, and he's proven himself to be an insufferable bollocks every single day. Wrong. I've been very wrong very many times. But sure, look, that's life lessons learned for you. Speaking of life lessons learned for you, Graham.
Yeah.
Our guest this week is Professor Roseanne Kenny from Trinity College, Dublin.
I'm really looking forward to this because I like science topics.
Yeah, so Professor Kenny and a team of researchers and scientists and brilliant boffins in Trinners have a study called the TILDA study, the Irish Longitudinal Aging Study, which looks at the process of aging. And she tells us a little bit about it and all that kind of crack. Don't worry, better explained by her than by me. But we're specifically talking to her about aging in general and how we can all try and just be healthier and stay younger for longer. And I'm delighted to say that Professor Roseanne Kenny from Trinity College joins us now. Professor Roseanne, thank you very much for having a chat with us, taking time out to explain to two curious Egypts what's going on now that we're feeling older.
You don't look older. So no, I'm very happy. Thank you. I'm very happy, and I think it's important to say that although my area of interest is aging and why we age and how to kind of manage our biological aging as much as possible and how much of it we can control, it's everything I'm going to say is pertinent to people 20 and above.
Yeah.
Because that's when the whole process really, really kicks in.
So, right, before we dive straight in and all that kind of thing, I first came across you, I think you were on Radio 1 recently doing an interview talking about the TILDA study. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, with great pleasure. Thank you. And with great pleasure to acknowledge my team in TILDA. I have about 45 people working on it, and they're fab young researchers and administrators, and also the participants, almost 9,000 of them, who've stuck with this study for 10 years. I'll tell you what it is. It's a longitudinal study. So that means you're looking at the same people at repeated episodes, in our case, every 2 years, as long as you can. In some studies, it's until people die. Okay? We've started this study, now it's age 45. So we're following people from age 45 onwards every 2 years. And if you can imagine you're a 45-year-old male and you've been in our study for the last 12, 13 years, then we know what you looked like physically and brain health wise, and your emotions and your social connections when you were 45. And we've been able to actually map and track how all of those different elements have changed over that period of time. And we continue to do that. And then from the research perspective, we can go back and say, okay, this man who was 45 when he came to us, he's now 65 and, he's had a stroke, or he's getting early signs of dementia, or he slowed down an awful lot, or he has arthritis. And we can go back to what he looked like at 45, including his blood tests, what we call biomarkers from the bloods, some of which are genetic markers, and say, right, what was it about that 45-year-old male which actually determined that those episodes were going to happen 20 years from the time we started following him up? And then we obviously generalize that to the Ireland as a whole, because we can do that. That's the way the sample frame has been set up. And then that helps us ultimately to inform individuals, not necessarily individuals in the trial, of course, but individuals in Ireland, but also policymakers, just about what are the important things that we can modify, we can do something about to prevent any untoward events later on in life. So that's what the study is. And it's one of the best, the terminology is phenotype. That just means characterized the studies of this sort worldwide. In other words, that we take elements from every sort of characteristic. We even look at people's attitudes to those close to them and their friendships and, all sorts of things, how much money they have in the bank, how much money they've had at any stage, what it's like to retire, and all of the things that happen during that transition period, what it's like for your kids to leave the house and your empty nest. What does that really impact on, and how deep is that impact on individuals, and who are the ones who are resilient to that, and who are the ones to succumb to that and actually really get down around that period of time. So it's all of those wonderful transitions that occur in life. And then, of course, because we're looking at the same people repeatedly, we have what we call natural experiments. And unfortunately, we had that dreadful recession. So we were actually able to look at the impact of that awful 2009 recession on people's lives, on every aspect, social, economic, and health, and whether or not, like, members of the family had to emigrate during that, whether they had to sell their house, the impact of all of that on brain health and physical health and other aspects. The other, of course, big natural disaster or experiment that occurred was COVID. And we actually did a special COVID wave to try and understand the impact of COVID on our participants and their families and their lives in general.
How do you find your participants?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So they have to be what we call a representative sample. So lots of people come to us and say, I'd love to be part of your study. I'd love to get the Tilda health assessment. The point is we have to do it randomly. So we got a geo directory working with the ESRI, which is all the addresses in Ireland. But there was no age attached to the addresses, right? There are no identifiables. So we took the addresses. We randomly, literally selected about 30,000 addresses and then cold called on 30,000 houses across Ireland.
Wow.
And now the way we did the random selection was correct statistically, in that we randomly selected proportionately more people in Dublin, because 1.3 million live in Dublin, and in Cork and in Galway, the Limerick, the cities, and then likewise in the rural Ireland. So it's a representative sample in that context. We cold called on houses, and it was 2009, and you remember we were pretty deep into the recession at that stage and all the shock horror that we were experiencing as a society. We had a remarkable response rate from cold calling on someone's door saying, is there anybody aged 50 or more lives here? And if so, would you like to take part in a longitudinal study? We'll be working with you every 2 years and you'll be giving us your information, and etc. And the response we had was so generous, as it continues to be. And I think it was because people 45 years and older really felt that they could do something for Ireland. They could do something for society at the time. This was their way of giving back when we were so limited in anything we could do to our society as a whole.
So it's, as you said, like 12, 13 years in. Is there any kind of key standouts that kind of you've gone, oh, this is interesting now? This is, because I mean, I'd imagine the data you guys have now is
it's brilliant.
Huge.
No, there's a whole lot of stuff that I mean, I suppose if I was to focus on the big ones, how important believe it or not, your friendships are, the quality of your friendships, your social network.
Yeah.
That you have close people in your network that you can share with. And one of the really interesting questions is, if you got sick at 2:00 in the morning, how many people do you have you could call if you were at home?
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. And that actually predicts an awful lot in terms of your health status, believe it or not. So how many people you can share with is very important. That's one of the main features, actually. And then in that context, as you get older, to always make sure you've got intergenerational friendships, right? That your friendships in throughout different decades. We don't do that, and we really don't do it in Ireland. We're very bad. The Portuguese and Spanish and Italians are much better than we are at that. On UK and Ireland we're poor. But to start early, making sure that so if you're 25 listening to this, how many people you could call a friend are over the age of 50 or 70 that you know. And likewise, for people of my age, how many younger people do I have? I'm really lucky because my son went to college in Dublin, and his friends were just great crack, lovely people. And I have retained contact with a cohort of those, and they're so refreshing to my life. So, but you have to make a conscious effort, and you have to reach out and to do that, because societally we don't do it. It doesn't come naturally to us to do.
Why does it not come natural to the UK and Ireland, I wonder?
I wonder, it's just a cultural thing. I don't know. I think people feel more comfortable with their peer group, but it comes back to the whole thing. If I was asked, what's the one thing in my life which is really important and going to sustain me throughout my life, I would say, remember variety. That's all you have to do. Whatever you're doing, remember variety. So that's variety in your friendships, variety in what gives you purpose in the day, variety on what you put on your plate. The more color, the better.
So it literally is the spice of life, as they say.
It is the spice of life. Even a variety in your exercise, so that your body is constantly being interested, constantly being stimulated by something. And if you think about people maybe in their 90s, and I hope you do, who are what you would say are aging really well, the one thing you'll find about them is they're interested. They're always interested in what's happening around them, and etc. And so the variety is part of that. Constant interest and changing and excitement always with life.
It's fascinating, and it's like everything you're saying seems perfectly logical and seems very straightforward and simple, and yet, as you said, like if I think of some of my relatives, aunts, uncles, mums, dads, like if I'm thinking about them, I'm kind of looking at it and saying, okay, would they have a huge amount of variety in their life? Some of them would, but then others, they'd be very sort of family orientated, like kids, grandkids, and that's kind of their lot, and they seem very happy and everything. But in terms of that variety piece, and even myself to an extent, outside of relatives, would I be able to call upon someone that's a friend that would be like 60 or older? I don't think I would.
So that's correct, and that's not uncommon. And I suppose my message is you need to consciously do it and reach out, and we need to as a society. I've got one great piece. We for Tilda. So 10 years into the study, we had a kind of an external review, to see, is it worth putting money into the study, or should the government close it down? And one of the most heartening things for me that came out of all of that was, and they had different models to apply to the materials that came out of Tilda to make this evaluation I'm about to share. And that was that Tilda has changed our attitude towards aging in Ireland. It has changed ageism in Ireland, in the media. Mostly they were media exposures that they were looking at. It's changed the language in the media and the approach and attitude of the media. And I just found that so refreshing. I think if it achieves nothing else, if we manage to do that, because ageism is horrible, and it's very hard for people to have a positive attitude and to feel enjoy the aging process, which it is a really enjoyable process, believe it or not. It's very difficult if constantly around you, you're being bombarded with negative messages and, negative terminology. So I think the fact that the attitudes have changed is brilliant. And I think the fact that we're talking to a young audience now about the aging process, their biology, when it starts in your 20s, and what you can do to ensure that you have a happier, better quality of life throughout your life. That's fabulous.
Absolutely. My dad always said to me that, like slagging him about getting old or whatever, just, he'd do something at home, be like, that's, you're getting old. And his response would always be, there's others who don't get that privilege, son. So like what you were saying there very much ties into that. But then in terms of, the aging process starting in your 20s, what can we do then to stay younger for longer, so to speak?
So there's a fabulous study called the Dunedin study, which is actually not like us, where we started at age 45 following people through, but they started at birth, and they just took 1,000 births in Dunedin, New Zealand in 1 year, and they've been following them. They're 50 now, every 4 years.
Wow.
And they showed actually that biological aging, when they measured it, there's a way you can do it through epigenetic clocks, like they're kind of DNA clocks, genetic clocks that measure the real age of your cell as opposed to the number of candles on your birthday cake. They showed that started way early on. And they when they looked, say, at the cohort when they were all aged 38, so all the same chronological age, there was a difference of almost 20 years in their biological age. So some people aged 38 were behaving biologically like 22-year-olds, but others were behaving like 48 and almost 50-year-olds. And then when they looked at, what's that? What's driving that? Those who were behaving older, whose cells were older, so biologically they were older, actually had difficult childhoods, divorce in the family, alcoholism in the family, etc., or they themselves had bad health behaviors, drinking, excessive alcohol, or taking drugs, or depression. Depression was a big driver, and stress. So I would say for those listening that the things that you can modify are to maybe modify excesses of alcohol or cigarettes was huge. And everything we look at, cigarettes is just so bad. I can't even tell you. It nearly explains 40% of all of the negative outcomes we look at, no matter what it is. It's cigarettes.
Thankfully, we don't see as many young people smoking these days. And actually, it was only last week, I was driving into the housing estate where I live, and I saw, and I mean, they were teenagers. They couldn't have been older than 16, and I saw them smoking. And it was like, I was actually shocked. You know what I mean? Like when I was 16, you see a lot of people smoking, but now it's kind of like, geez, I thought that was the kind of the age group that, they've grown up knowing better with the smoking ban in place and all that kind of thing. But
vaping is changing that practice. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
When the tobacco companies started buying up the vaping companies, I was slow to the mark in my thought process. I thought, what the heck is going on here? Yeah. Why would that be? But of course, it's to get them addicted to nicotine. Nicotine is incredibly addictive. And I mean, it's a very easy step then from a vape to a cigarette. So I think you're absolutely right, Danny. I think that we have regressed hugely with exposing people to vaping. Giving it to people who are smokers to try and help them get off cigarettes, adults, is different. Yeah. But introducing kids to it and addicting them to something they were never addicted to before is almost a recipe to disaster, because the next step for them will be cigarettes, and maybe worse.
It's incredible.
You say there 40% there of the negative thing was from smoking.
Yeah.
Like, do you just mean like getting sick or health? Yeah.
Health. Getting sick in adult life, like having a stroke, having a heart attack, kidneys going. But now it's sometimes very difficult to separate, when you're doing these analyses, the impact of smoking and of course the impact of stress or poor socioeconomic circumstances. I mean, if you have money pressures, and you're smoking, I mean, how are you going to, as a scientist, how am I going to look and say, well, that much is the smoking and that much is the money pressures? So we know that economic pressures is a huge stress on people physically, and that and other health behaviors is one of the reasons why, if you take the United Kingdom, mainland UK, there's almost a 20-year difference between the time you die in Glasgow and the time you die in the south of England, Gloucester. And it's all related to poor socioeconomic conditions.
Glasgow is one of the poorest cities in Europe, isn't it?
Yeah, and they've one of the earliest death rates. We really don't know why all of that is happening. But there are a number of factors, as I've mentioned. Poverty is one. Their diet is an awful. Cigarette smoking is another. So you know, there are a number of different reasons that can explain it. Because you see, you know, getting older, only 20% of it is because of your genetic makeup. I mean, Dana, you were talking about your dad and living long, and earlier when we were chatting beforehand about grandparents and stuff. Well, the fact of the matter is, you're living longer is only 20% of what your relatives have done in terms of living longer will contribute to your living longer. The rest you have control over. The rest are things like your food and your physical activity and your attitude, frankly, and your friendships and your social engagement, and you know, lots of other behaviors like with cold water, as we were talking about, etc. So we can control 80% of how we age. That's fantastic. I love that message, because then that's full of hope.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the earlier you start, the better.
So you mentioned stress, and the cold water one as well. I definitely want to talk to you about that, because that's something that I'm constantly seeing in my social media feed, and I'm constantly seeing friends of mine take to beaches around the country at stupid o'clock in the morning to have their morning swim. But you mentioned stress a minute ago, and it's something that I've been reading a lot about recently, because we had Jacinda Ardern and Nicola Sturgeon both kind of referenced burnout in that as they stepped down, and it was very prominent. And it's kind of like that's opened the door to these conversations around burnout and stress. How significant is it to be able to acknowledge when you're feeling it, and what impact can it have on you to address it early on?
So we all get stressed. I mean, it's part of life, unfortunately. It's really, really important to know when you're stressed and to try and stand back. I'll tell you a funny story. One of my boys, my lads, gave me one of those Garmin phones for Christmas. It keeps beeping when I'm at meetings saying, you need to relax, you need to relax. And I get stressed out, and I feel like saying, shut up, I know, but I have to make this point. But having an awareness of when you're getting stressed is really important. Heart rate goes up. That's a good clue. If you feel your heart rate going up, that you're stressed. Now, like, there's a good science now around de-stressing techniques. So once you recognize it, if you can meditate once a day, twice a day, 2 minutes, 5 minutes a time, whatever you can manage in the day, that's important. Yoga is great because it mixes relaxing type of exercises and stretches with meditation type regimes. Mindfulness is good, and that's trying to stay in the moment. I am really bad at that. I'm always thinking of what I'm trying to do. So I find mindfulness very, very difficult. But also, it's all very well for us to be sitting back talking about all of these techniques. But frankly, if you're under money pressure, if you're wondering if you're going to be evicted at the end of the month, none of this is going to alleviate your stress, because the factor that's causing your stress is far bigger than anything that we're talking about. You know, it's far more in control of you than anything else. So I think we have to be prepared to help people, and at a policy level and at a societal level, to do our very best to ensure people don't get stressed. And at the moment, I just can't believe what's happening, frankly. With respect to stress. So, but you can be aware of stress. And if you're in a position to use those de-stressing methodologies, is great. Generally speaking, if you've got a slow heart rate, that's really good. That means you're not getting stressed. So, And what the things I talked about slow the heart rate, but so does physical activity. And physical activity will help with stress.
So I'm just looking now, right? My resting heart rate apparently is 56 beats per minute. I've no, is that good, bad, or indifferent now?
Very good. That's very good. I would say if your resting heart rate, it depends on age. There's a very sharp age gradient with it. But at your age, your resting heart rate between 50 and 60 is very good. That's fine.
I'll take it. And
even if you get a bit older, like less than 65 is grand, you know?
I'm hoping this watch isn't broken now, because that's made me feel a bit better. So that's good news.
In the topic of stress, though, like non-scientifically, anecdotally, in my life and social circle, I would be very concerned about the young ones, the late teens, the early 20s, who are living their life on say social media and photographs and seeking gratitude from likes and positive comments. I mean, what are we going to do with that? Like,
I know, no. So this is it's clearly a stressor. Can work both ways. It can alleviate stress if you're really sharing with people you trust, and it's a kind of a productive sharing. But generally speaking, particularly as you say, for the younger, it becomes a competition. It's almost a way of it is definitely putting extra pressure on people, in some cases shaming individuals, feeling ashamed of themselves because they're making comparisons with impossible comparators, like, ridiculous things. So I agree with you. It's incredibly worrying for our society. The one thing I would say that's positive is we know from a lot of science experiments that if you're stressed and you can share that stress, that it reduces the effect of the stress on your hormone system and your nervous system. And they're the two big things which do damage if you're constantly stressed. So there's a lovely experiment that was done in the States where two sets of undergraduate psychology students, they were divided up, and both the groups were given a subject to debate, and they were all told, you're going to debate this subject in front of la, and it was quite nerve-wracking for them, both the topic and the fact that they were going to be debating in front of people. One half of the class were allowed to talk to each other about what they were going to say and how they were going to say it and what their worries were about it, and kind of get help from each other and share the experience. The others were not. They'd go away and work on it on their own. And the hormone levels I'm talking about and the nervous system levels were measured before either of the group were given the debate topic, and then after the debate. And the group that had shared had far lower rises in the hormone levels or the nerve system stress levels than the other group, showing that sharing helped them to manage the stress they were going to have because of the tasks they were given, but it helped them manage it. It's halved the stress impact. So sharing, that's just one experiment that I like because I think it shows it really nicely in young people, and sharing makes a difference. It helps.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's one of them, like I've heard it for as long as I can remember, that whole a problem shared is a problem halved, and sharing is caring, and all that kind of thing. But sometimes it's good to get the science behind it as well, to be like, look, these aren't just kind of little idioms that people come out with from time to time. There's genuine hardcore science behind it. So, do it. Don't bottle it up, kind of thing.
The one thing is, which is important, when you're sharing, make sure it's not with someone who's going to listen and come up with decent solutions or even discussion with you. There's nothing worse than sharing with someone who's going to be critical, of you inappropriately, or of the person you might be sharing about. It might be something about a relationship or whatever, and they would say, oh, that fella or that girl, what do you expect? And, all negativity. That won't help you either. It has to be someone will be reflective and constructive. And at the very least, listen to you. That's brilliant, because that's you sharing. But if the listening is coupled with kind of negative nuances, that doesn't help.
Do you know what I do? If I get like a knot in my stomach or a sense of stress or whatever, and I know what it is, I take a few deep breaths and I say it out loud. And it's almost like my nervous system is responding to that. And if I do it 2 or 3 times, I feel the feeling kind of disappear slowly. And then all of a sudden I feel okay. So, I mean, we can still talk to our nervous system, and our
Yeah.
nervous system can respond to that.
Wow, that's a great point, Graham.
Yeah.
We can talk to our nervous system.
Yeah.
Now, the breathing you're doing, you talked about breathing, and that is, I said to you, the vagus nerve is really important. That's the nerve that slows the heart down. And it actually slows down nearly all of the systems in our body. It's incredibly important for relaxing us and for relaxing everything, our gut even. So if you breathe, take, count 4 in, or 3 in, hold for 4 or 3, and then slowly exhale. Even do that 5 times.
Yeah.
The breathing system and the receptors there trigger a slowing mechanism, and they slow the vagus nerve right down. And you can test it. You can take your baseline heart rate, do it after breathing. So that's what you're doing, as well as talking to your system. I laugh to myself. If I'm getting stressed, or it's usually annoyed with somebody at a meeting, I imagine them in a funny position. And I laugh to myself, and it completely diffuses anything and makes my comments far more sensible than they would.
I'm going to adopt that process.
Yeah.
It's the breathing thing, and you mentioned cold water, and in a clunky attempt to segue, breathing helps as well in terms of that cold water piece and managing, because as we were talking beforehand, and Mero mentioned his cold showers and that kind of thing, and I've kind of said, like, I'm very curious about it, but I've always wondered, is it just a bit gimmicky, and is it a bit of a fad? But you were saying, no, cold water has massive benefits on us.
Cold water has massive benefits on us. Absolutely. So if you think of a cell, and we've trillions of them, but I'll give you an example of one cell. A cell can be, there are things which are toxic to a cell if you deprive it of oxygen. But for a while, the shock of that actually awakens other systems in the cell which were dormant. And that's really good for the cell. It starts to kind of reinvigorate. The other one is cold water. It's a shock to the cell. And it's actually good for it because it makes other systems in the cell waken up. Yeah. It's a very well-known old physiological, not really technique, but actual pathway that we have. And it's called hormesis. So cold water is the one that we can do as humans. You can't be depriving ourselves of oxygen often, or radiation is the other thing. But we can do cold water. So it's good for the cells. It wakens up the pathways that had previously been dormant in the cell for a period of time. But it's also very good, probably as a consequence of that, in de-stressing, because it reduces all of this. Eventually, it reduces all of those stress responses. And it also balances our hormones, particularly the hormones involved in depression, mood changes, stress, and immunity. I used to get in chest infections. I had asthma up until I started doing cold water showers every morning. And I haven't had an attack in 4 years. That's anecdotal, but actually there are randomized controlled trials now, which have shown that if you randomize people into taking cold water showers or not, that those who took cold water showers, particularly if it's coupled by physical activity during the day, but even the cold water showers themselves, were significantly less likely to get chest infections and missed significantly fewer days at work.
So start taking cold showers is what I need to do, basically. Yeah,
but be very careful how you do it. So there's 2 ways you can do it, and there's no science behind which way is best. I know Graham was saying he takes it every morning. I was really delighted to hear that. Explains your beautiful complexion, Graham. But so some people do their ablutions with hot water first, do all the cleaning, washing the hair, whatever, and then stand under a cold shower. Graham was saying, for no reason that he's sure about, he just gets in under it. Is that right? Do you want to say what you said?
Yeah, no, like I think it started by accident in terms of waiting for the water to turn warm, but I just continued it, like, and it'll be 2 or 3 minutes before the water gets to the right temperature, but I mean, that's
very good. If
don't
you
delay it.
2 or 3 minutes is very good. I mean, so I'd say to anybody who's starting it, just choose whichever way you want. Go cold first and then hot and clean, or the other way around. But the important thing is we don't really know how long you have to stay under a shower to have the benefits. So it's a kind of a guesstimate, a half a minute to 1 minute. And maybe some people do it for two, obviously some people do it for longer. But start slowly, because don't put yourself off. So I would say start for the count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm out of here. Whatever. And then start very slowly and build it up very gradually. Don't be afraid to do that. The other thing is, it's really good if you're feeling tired and you have to do something, you have to go to something and you feel, oh, I don't feel like this, have a cold shower. It'll wake you up. It gets you into a completely different phase. And it's very good, and particularly cold water swimming appears to be good. And there's evidence now emerging with respect to this for mood, for depression. If you're feeling, low mood or that, it's very good for you. And there's a couple of things. Obviously, the cold water itself, and secondly, particularly if you're swimming in the sea, you meet people, and there's the social engagement and the sharing of a common task. All of that is very good for us. But we think how we've evolved. We've evolved as animals, and then very early, humanoids who were sleeping in caves at night, getting up with the dawn and first thing in the morning, in and out of the water, hiding in water, in and out of cold and relatively warm atmospheres all the time. Now we're inclined to really spoil ourselves. I mean, if the house isn't above a certain temperature, and if the shower isn't above a certain temperature, you were frozen. But then a lot of our systems are asleep because we're not doing anything to waken them up and challenge them. And that's why it's so important to keep doing that.
It's definitely food for thought. And it's, I said, I know I've seen a lot of people, and the whole dry robe debate that went on social media as well. But there definitely seems to be benefits to it. So maybe I will start. I think I would go with your method, Mero. I think the idea of being cold first and then the hot water kicking in probably sounds better than being hot and then going to cold. I'm not sure how I'd cope there at all now. But
yeah, it's a nice feeling.
Yeah. But before we let you go, Professor Kenny, sleep. How important is sleep in all of this stuff?
Very important. I'm really glad you brought up sleep. Sleep is really, really important. And we're only understanding how important it is recently, actually. Now, I want to qualify that, because when I'm giving lectures, and I say that, so many people say, oh God, you've worried me even more, you've depressed me even more, I don't sleep well. And it's true. Like, not everybody is a good sleeper, and it's actually innate in some of us, like a chronotrope. It's a talk for another day, but it is actually innate how we sleep. But there are things you can do to help sleep. And one of the reasons that our sleep patterns are so bad now as a society as a whole, lots of people have sleeping problems, we're under so much pressure and stress at work that we take all of that to the pillow. Yeah. And we're constantly ruminating about it and stuff. So it is worthwhile stepping back, and before you get into the bedroom, or even when you're there, make a list of everything that's bothering you, and then make a list of everything you're going to do tomorrow. So you're not lying there thinking, oh, tomorrow I must do this, or next week I must just write them all down. Get that out while you're awake. Get rid of that. Secondly, blue light. So we've evolved with yellow light predominantly. That's the lovely fires we used to sit around, etc. Now we're exposed to blue light constantly, and the melatonin and supranuclear chiasmic nucleus in the brain, which govern our sleep-wake cycles, they don't respond that well to blue light. It's not a natural trigger for them, so it disrupts our normal sleep patterns because of that. So we really shouldn't expose ourselves to blue light for an hour before bed. Now, people find that difficult because they watch telly towards the end or whatever, but I'm just giving you the facts if you have trouble. Make sure your room is absolutely pitch black and as silent as possible. Whatever you have to do to make it pitch black, do that. And then, hot bath or hot shower at night, which will relax your systems. That's also good.
So I'm such a light sleeper. Like I'd hear the grass grow, and like I have earplugs every night, big industrial earplugs.
Yeah.
Because of the noise, and like little noises get me. And I would say I get maximum 7 hours sleep a night.
So if you get 7, that's good.
Okay.
If that's really good. I mean, without waking during the 7 hours.
Yeah, I wouldn't wake. Once I'm asleep, I would wake up when my alarm wakes
You
me.
are so lucky, believe me. You're in a
Lovely.
minority. Yes. How about you, Danny?
Yeah, I'm weird with sleep and that I'm strict about it. So like I'd have a bedtime. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd like 10:30, I'd be like, right, that's it. I'm going up, and I'd be in bed, and I want to be asleep by 11:30 because I get up at 6:30. So I try stick to that as much as I possibly can. I'm probably not great with like I'd be a devil for going up to bed and then I'd go on my phone for a half hour
I was
before.
just going to give that scenario. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, to say between 7 and 9 hours sleep is the optimum, okay? For brain health and physical health. So if you can get 7, that's what I'm saying, Graham, you're very lucky. And if you once you hit the pillow, if you stay asleep, that's brilliant. As people get older, their sleep is more fragmented. They get up to the loo, or they just don't sleep as well. And that's kind of a normal process of aging. But if you do that, that is brilliant. Now we all do this. Get into the bed, look at the phone, say, I'm just looking at it for 1 second just to see if there's anything else. And a half an hour later, you're still on it.
Yeah.
So really, if you have problems, and obviously you don't, but if you did, you should really leave the phone outside the door, the bedroom door.
Yeah. It's creatures of convenience because now the phone is everything. It's your alarm clock. It's your internet. So it's that whole thing of. And Mero, do you use your phone as the alarm as well?
Yeah.
So that's, and I said it to my wife as well, that I'm like, I'm going to get one of those old fashioned alarm clocks to try and leave the phone. And I'm going to go back to bringing a book to bed because I can't just get into bed and go head down and that's it. I need to do something for a few minutes beforehand.
Book is the thing, because there's nothing unnatural about that. And it'll get you into a really good space before you go to sleep. Book is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
If you can, and get the old fashioned alarms if there are any of them around anywhere.
I'll have to go hunting. I'm sure the middle oils in those shops, I'm sure will have something old school anyway. But Professor Kenny, it's been brilliant chatting to you, and it's
so
been
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, so fascinating. And hopefully we'll get to chat to you again in another little while and hear more about what the Tilda team have been up to, because it's great work. It's integral to everybody, but it's fascinating. So thank you very much.
Delighted. Thank you.
It's those kind of chats, Graham, that I always wish we had about 3 hours with the person.
I know, yeah, because it flew through and it was so interesting. And she was an absolutely lovely lady.
Brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. And
I really enjoyed that.
Sometimes when we talk to a sciencey person, to give them their official title, of course.
Professors, Danny.
Yeah, I'm always a little bit nervous that they're going to be too academic and they're not going to, like, the information won't be accessible and they won't be able to tell us in a way that, like, you know, the layman like us can understand. But in fairness, she, like, everything she said made perfect sense, and I'm like, right, I need to stop being such an antisocial person. I need to work cold water into my hygiene routine, and I need to get better sleep.
Absolutely.
Three simple. I can do all them, Graham.
Of course you can, yeah.
Nothing there that I can't do, and it should help me in the long term.
People will learn a lot from this.
Absolutely, they will. And check out what the Tilda team are doing. You can just, if you Google Tilda Study Ireland, you'll get lots of information. The website has loads and loads of stuff and all the different reports and all that kind of stuff. And as Professor Kenny said, they've been following these people now for over a decade. So if you go onto the website and you go on and you look at what the Tilda team are up to, you'll see that consistency and that level of detail. And it's fascinating, genuinely fascinating. But the reality of it all, I suppose, is that, you know, we all need to do a little bit better for each other, but equally for society. We're all going to get old someday. And if we're not doing something to make elderly people have a better life today, who's going to do it for us when we get to our 70s and whatnot, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, good chat. Enjoyed that. And a big thanks to Professor Kenny and the guys in Trinity for setting that up and taking time out to chat to us.
Great hustle.
Indeed. Mero, we won't talk much about anything else, and I'll give you a week off because I think you and other Shamrock Rovers fans need to get together and have a conversation about what's happening.
I'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, so we'll give you a chance to right wrongs, and then we'll come back to it. that fair?
Perfect. That's perfect. If you want to listen to any previous episodes or this episode, you've already listened to. Well, that's a stupid statement. Sorry. If you want to listen to all previous episodes of What's the Story podcast, just search WTS Pod on any podcast provider, Spotify, Podcast Republic, Apple Podcasts, anywhere, everywhere you can get a podcast. You go to WTSpod.com and you can get us on Twitter at WTS Pod. He's at Daniel Murray on Twitter. I'm at Merrigan Mania at Twitter. And until next time, Daniel.
Have a cold shower and make a friend. Clear eyes.
Full hearts.
Can't lose.
Oh, sweet.